Hi everyone, my name's Eric and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Eric.
And I've been through the steps as they're laid out in the big book with the help of a sponsor who's done the same. Caring and loving higher power. I am doing my amends right now and I practice 10, 11, 12 on a daily basis. First I have to apologize, my breathing is terrible right now. My allergies are like through the roof. So if I start coughing, please pray for me. It's been a rough night. I just want to briefly qualify. I grew up 20 minutes north in Leominster, and I'm the type of alcoholic that it's truly just alcoholism with me. Not that I didn't have like traumatic things growing up happen to me, but I don't suffer from any sort of trauma or anything. I never really was drinking to block out anything other than restless, irritable, and discontent. As a young kid, I kind of like fantasized about booze. I come from a family of hard drinkers, I guess you could say. Very, very few alcoholics in a very large family. Kind of like work hard, play hard type of people. And I saw the relief that they would have at like family gatherings and stuff. And so like 8 or 9 years old, I just like couldn't wait. And I'm not even really sure when I had my first drink. Getting a little older, to like 10 or 11, I was allowed to have a little bit of wine. And but I know by the time I was 12 or 13, I was stealing booze, and by the time I was 14, I had reached the age where I could get enough booze to get drunk. So pretty much any time I was around booze, I drank enough to get drunk or close enough to it. Drinker all throughout high school. So by the time I got in there, I was on the football team, so I could meet some of the older guys, and I went to some of the parties, which it was an amazing feeling. I felt like at home. In Bill's story, he talks about like he had arrived, that feeling like I'm home, I'm here, this is where I belong. Like I remember having that sense of belonging that I didn't have, and I ran with it really hard. And I went from kind of a student athlete to dropping out at 17, moved out with an older guy. I got into drug dealing and stuff, and my drinking just went way out of control. Because of that lifestyle, I had witnessed just some wrongdoings, I guess you could say, and some people got hurt, and I needed to get out of there. So by the time I was like 20, 21, I got into, my family's always been in the restaurant business, so I kind of got into that. Fast forward to like 24 years old, I'm now living in Boston, and I'm bartending, and I'm drinking all the time. I'm going out when I'm not working, drinking when I am. And it was awesome. It was a blast. I had a great time out there. I lived in Allston, Brighton. I worked in Faneuil Hall. I made tons of money, and I have nothing to show for it. And it just went from bad to worse, though. I had gotten into other substances. I developed an addiction, which I didn't think was even possible. I was very uneducated on the subject. And 25 years old, I found myself in Bridgewater. I don't know if anyone's ever been there. It's you get sectioned there. It's like a forced detox, but it's unmedicated. It's an old Colony State Prison. And this is like really where my story begins, because I reached that place, and I wanted to stop. I wanted to stop everything. Like I was ready to admit defeat, and I was in the little detox unit, the Delta unit, where it's just a bunch of cots, a bunch of guys laying down, street bums, junkies, you name it, all violently ill, and I never wanted to be there again. And it's a 30-day stay. I went to the other part, the Alpha unit, where you kind of finish out, and halfway through I was there. I was ready to go right back to it. This time is going to be different. This time is going to be different. I want to go back to that old feeling when I was at that party, when I was young. I want that feeling back. I didn't realize the progression, like it's only going to get worse. I thought I could reverse it. So that started a cycle of about a year and a half, 2 years of in and out of like skid bids in jail and detoxes. And each time I would go in just ready to admit complete defeat, and I'd come out no, this time is going to be different. If I just start working out again, or if I get the right girl, all these lies I told myself, and I believed them, and I was just holding on to this old dream that just wasn't there anymore. September 16th, 2013, I found myself at my third halfway house, and I had relapsed a week into it. And this was a halfway house that if they found out about that, they kick you out. And, I did my stuff. I was in my room, and I was looking in the mirror, and I could not believe the situation I was in. Homeless. I walked in there with a trash bag full of summer clothes. I didn't even know what I was going to do for the winter. I had to rifle through all the donations and just to get pairs of pants and long sleeves. No one was willing to talk to me. I was absolutely broke, and here I am again, doing it again. And I just dropped to my knees. I had been to enough meetings, forced into enough meetings to kind of hear the suggestions a little bit. Sitting in the back, you can still hear. And I fell to my knees, and I just prayed to God. I mean, God was never a big subject in my life. I was never totally with or totally against, really. I just never really cared. I just prayed, and I said, save me. Save me, and I'll do it. I'll do this. I'll do AA. I'll do everything that they tell me to do. And no one ever found out about it. So very early, I got very involved out of fear, out of absolute fear. I didn't want my legacy to be dead in my mid-20s. I didn't want it. Scared to death. So I went to a bunch of meetings. I'm raising my hand. I'm absolutely out of my mind with fear and anxiety. And I went to a few meetings and raised my hand and asked for help. And I realize now that people weren't out to get me, but when you're 3 days sober and you go to a meeting, you raise your hand, you're like, I need help, and no one goes up to you after the meeting. It's pretty heartbreaking. So I did deal with that for about a week or two, and so finally I went to a big book meeting, and a guy had stood up while he shared, and he said, I'm available for sponsorship and all this, and I'm like, that's my guy. He cannot turn me down. After the meeting, I beelined it to him, and I was just like, you're my sponsor. And he was a little reluctant at first. He told me to call him and stuff, and anytime I saw him at a meeting, I'd corner him, and finally we'd start reading through the book, and it was a great experience reading with him because I was starting to feel a part of as I was reading. Because you come in here and people are talking about stuff, and you have no idea, but then you start reading, and you got this guy teaching you. And it's like, oh, I know what they're talking about, and slowly people are seeing you doing the work and seeing you with a sponsor and getting involved, and they start to trust you a little bit. So I all of a sudden are getting these friends and everything, and it's just really awesome. It was just a great experience. My first 3 months were very painful, but a miracle too, absolute miracle. And then I had to start writing my fourth step. So, and this is the game changer for me, because I started to realize why I started to go back out, and it was because of my expectations with people. They never met them, and it hurt. I wanted to sit in this director's seat, and I wanted everyone to do what I wanted them to do, and they weren't doing it. And I would drink over it, I realized. So while writing my resentments, I learned a lot while writing. To be able to see my part and to see that I was just a very insecure person. It was really magical writing. I got to my fears, and this was the heavy part. I've actually had a friend tell me that, if you look at someone's fourth step, there's always a heavy part to it. And for me, it was the fears. It was just a long list. And, going into fears, it's like, as a kid or as a young adult, I always looked at fear as physical pain, my fear of physical pain. The thing is, on my own will, I can conquer these fears. 12 years old, going out on the football field for the first time. It's terrifying. The thing is, if I keep doing it, I don't need to pray to God for it. I can keep going out on that field, and I'm going to be fine. All of a sudden it's going to be fun to me. With heights, I'm terrified of heights. However, if I climb enough ladders and I do this, I can conquer that fear on my own. Walking into a jail for the first time, terrifying, but I can conquer that on my own. I don't need God. However, when I'm writing my list, these aren't physical fears anymore. They had a very common theme. It was all things that were going to turn my very lonely situation even more lonelier. It's very simple, but these are like lists of people dying, girlfriends, stuff like that. Like just all of a sudden, like I'm just like this pit of darkness that I'm terrified of. And it took me a long time to realize that conquering this fear, all these fears, is very simple. Is if I invite God into my life, I'm never going to be lonely. But I'm writing between 3 and 5 months sober, so I can't comprehend a whole lot. But I was told that it's okay, that the understanding can come after the action. So I wrote those. I wrote those fears. And I get into sex inventory, and I'm going to be totally honest with you. I kind of wanted to share on this because this is like the thing that I'm like kind of like a little shaky on. I wrote my sex inventory like a half hour before my fifth step was read. I had been putting it off that whole week, and I was meeting with my sponsor like 2 hours after I got out of work, and I like went to this restaurant to sit by myself to write it. And even then, I was just like I don't know what was blocking me. There was something blocking me. Maybe it was just a little too much, But I did, write down as much as I could, and I got into the columns with it, and even then. It's funny, I'm doing my fifth step too, and he's telling me stuff, and I'm talking about it, And if you're on the outside looking in, you'd think I understood everything. However, I really wasn't getting a grasp on it, and I think it was because I was early. Maybe it was God working my life, kind of just didn't want me to get overwhelmed. I don't know. But now, like, going into my second year of sobriety, this is the thing that I've had to deal with more than anything. Like, looking back at that ideal and looking back on my past patterns and really, like, comprehending them. And I look back and it's, what's my pattern? What's my pattern of behavior? What's my pattern? And, I use this stuff for validation. I feel alone. I feel less than, and I use this and other behaviors to feel better about myself. See, all my life, today and when I was using, I'm trying to end my suffering. I had a poor solution before, which was alcohol and bad behavior. I now have a much better solution, but always trying to end my suffering. And I used women because of that. It made me feel a lot better. And, ideal or not, it didn't matter. And I look at some of my past and, not everything's terrible. I did have some girlfriends that, everything was honest, nothing was done. But I also was indiscriminate on who I choose as far as, like, what situation they were in. As far as I know, I've never been cheated on. As far as I know. However, I've been like on like I've been the other guy a lot, and it was that feeling of validation, like I took your girl type of thing, and it was always like a momentary solution, like that feeling of like dominance and just like I don't know, like feeling like a friggin' Viking, pretty much. Like I just went and I conquered, and but it was so temporary because I didn't realize it at the time. I was drinking over things like that because it never lasted. And then the guilt would set in. And the fact that I'm alone. I do that, but then I'm alone. That only lasts so long. That's the biggest thing. And I know we all, like it says, we all have sex problems. It's great. And it's, I'm trying not to get off track, but I guess that's a common thing too. That was my big thing. That's what caused me so much pain. So I was in a relationship for the better part of my first year. My second year, I think we made it like 5 months and then broke up. We're actually back together now, but we've broke up like 5 times since then. So now I'm 2 years sober, guys. I wanted to walk in here just like as honest as possible, but we broke up in February in the middle of like the worst winter ever, and I couldn't drive. I'm in this like cold apartment by myself, and I reached an emotional bottom because although I didn't go into past behaviors of inciting jealousy, bitterness, or suspicion, I had gone so far beyond my ideal that I wanted to drink because of that. And it's the amount of pain that I felt during that winter, I never want to feel again. But it did get me closer to God, because although I got close to drinking, I didn't, because I did invite God in at the very last moment. And I was able to analyze this. Like, I was just going so far beyond. And it's like, why was I doing that? Because of that lonely feeling. I'm all alone, I wasn't inviting God in on a daily basis. I thought I was praying every morning. But my action throughout the day was not the same. So I'd gone far off the road with my ideal. And then I went to extremes with it. And then I wanted to hold off completely. And I realized, although it's not the worst thing in the world, I had like tightened up my ideal beyond what was sane, and realistic. And going on, I realized that I'm going to extremes. I'm going from my old behavior as like a late teen, early 20, and then I'm going into like what I learned as a child, like pretty much like guilt, Now I can't like hook up with anyone. And I'm not trying to get all crazy with it, but it's things that need to be talked about, I feel like this stuff isn't talked about enough. If you got two people that are totally honest with themselves, regardless of, the relationship situation, as long as, no one's getting hurt, it's okay. And I had to realize that too. That I don't have to be like in a committed relationship all the time. That might not be realistic and sane to me. But I felt that old judgment come in, and I had to release that as well. And I found a balance around the summer of, and then I started to get like, clarity and just, I don't know, I felt much more in touch with my higher power because I was seeking a realistic and sane ideal. And I'm trying to wrap it up now. Because now I'm back in a relationship, so it's like, I guess I finally like found myself okay with being alone and okay with what I was doing. And I had found that realistic, insane ideal. And, we're getting into character defect stuff now, but I found that balance. And I felt okay. And I stopped seeking so hard. And that's one thing that I've seen in other people in early sobriety, or actually at any point in sobriety, is that like hard seeking of someone else, needing to be in a relationship, needing it. And I finally found myself in a position where I didn't really need anything. I was very happy. A big solution to when I was getting really hairy with my ideal, going from extreme to extreme, I found myself getting into service work, and that's been the biggest thing for me. I got in with the Massachusetts Young People's Convention, and it's just like step work in the beginning. It was, it wasn't so much what I was doing, what you were looking at. It was that feeling of being a part of again. I was starting to feel that, and it was truly amazing because I had found the love that I was seeking in other ways, and finally I stopped seeking in other areas, and I got whole again. And I noticed that the person that I had dated had kind of done the same thing, and our paths kind of crossed again. And that's where I'm at today. And we'll probably break up in 3 weeks. Who knows? That's the thing. It rounds back to like we all have sex problems. It's okay. As long as we're not inciting bitterness, jealousy, or suspicion. That's where I will drink. I mean, there's a negative promise in there. There's a few in the book, but only a few. Where if you do this, you will drink, not might, will. And I got really close to that, and I don't ever want to be there again. I learned a big lesson over the winter, and You know, if you're looking for relationship advice, please find it elsewhere. But but as far as like healthy ideals, I mean, this is something that I've actually like been able to talk about with people that have different practices than me. I'm a heterosexual white guy. I mean, it's pretty plain, you know, but I'm able to talk about it with people that, you know, have different practices and be able to find their ideal and find health in this. And, you know, we're all just trying to end our suffering. And, you know, this book is where it is. So if you're new, just coming back and never did this, I suggest finding someone that has experience with it and get going. And that's all I got. Thank you very much.